And we're good to go.
Are we starting? Are we in? Hey,
Yep.
everyone. Welcome to the Santa Cruz Moto Film Festival bonus content live interviews. Thanks for joining us. I hope everyone is enjoying the films this year. I know that I have. It's a great challenge to be able to curate a wide selection of films, but I think we've done a good job. But we couldn't have done it without the great filmmakers, and that's why I wanted to interview some of them and get behind the scenes and learn more. So first up, this is a film that you may not have seen because it actually wasn't in this year's film festival. In fact, it was in last year's film festival, which got shut down due to COVID. But we actually curated the films, had them judged, and this was the winner for Best Feature in last year's Santa Cruz Moto Film Festival. This is a great film. There's still an opportunity to go see it. We have it in our extended viewing. So for all the people with us today, it's a bonus that we threw in for you. The film is NEBDR, and the filmmaker is Sterling Noren. If you've not heard of Sterling, he's a fixture for over a decade in the adventure motorcycle film industry. He's done a lot. He's definitely one of the best. So glad to have Sterling with us. Sterling, why don't you say hi to everyone?
Hey, everybody out there. Good to be here. I love Santa Cruz and I love motorcycling and I love film festivals. So what a great place to be right now.
What a great mix. Thank you so much for joining us. So for anyone who doesn't know what NEBDR or BDR, Sterling, you want to tell everyone what that is?
Yeah, NEBDR stands for the Northeast Backcountry Discovery Route. And Backcountry Discovery Routes is a nonprofit organization. I was one of the founders. We created this organization back in 2010, and its mission originally began to create and preserve off-road riding opportunities across the United States. So in a nutshell, what we do is we pick a different state or a different region every year, and then we go figure out a way to ride across that state off-road in the dirt, on forest roads, things like that. And then we make a movie about that experience. We publish a map. We give away a free GPS track so that people can watch the film, get inspired. Then they can have the tools and resources they need to go out and have these experiences on their motorcycles in the backcountry.
Yeah, it's really cool. I love it because you guys are introducing these routes that I didn't know existed. And you've been doing this quite a while. How many of these films have you done?
We just finished our 10th one. That was the Northeast BDR project that's in your film festival. Last year would have been the 11th one, but because of the pandemic, we didn't do a BDR route last year. What we ended up doing was creating a brand new 10-year anniversary film about the history of the BDR. And that was just premiered last weekend.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, how much of an inspiration this is. Even I watch and I go, oh, maybe I could do it. You know, it's exciting. So let's talk a little bit about the NEBDR, and can you tell everyone what states it goes through and what kind of roads you're on?
Yeah, it goes through, I think, 6, if I'm not mistaken, different states. So it starts in New York, actually New York City. And we thought that was kind of cool. Like never would have imagined a BDR would go through a place like New York City, but we started in New York City and we rode up to, I think there's a smaller town where it actually starts north of there, but basically it goes through New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. And it's 1,000 miles plus. You're on back roads, scenic 2-lane asphalt roads, dirt roads, Jeep roads, a variety of different tracks and trails through the Northeast. And, you know, the Northeast is not the first place you think about when you think about these off-road motorcycle places to go ride. Usually people go out west. And so the challenge and the opportunity for us was to create one of these kind of routes on the East Coast. And we started out with the Mid-Atlantic BDR. And so the Northeast BDR is the second East Coast BDR route. And you could link those up together and go from Virginia up to Maine on a BDR route now. So that's like 2,000 miles of off-road riding on the East Coast. So it's really big for people that live in the East Coast that want to get out on their adventure motorcycles, get into the backcountry, experience some of these really cool things, and not have to drive across the country to get there.
And to do this, you have some talented riders who join you on this. You want to talk a little bit about the riders you invited on this?
Yeah, absolutely. But even before the riders that went on the official filming project, we have so many riders that are helpful in just putting the route together. That takes years of legwork before we actually go out and film the movie. So right now we've got people in different states out there in the field, researching roads, driving roads, looking at maps, talking to landowners, kind of figuring out what the best place is to ride across a state or a region. And they'll do that for 2 or 3 years to kind of piece it all together before they settle on a final route. And then I'll go out and scout the route as the filmmaker to kind of get an idea of what's ahead and how to maybe best film it. And then we'll do the filming itself. And that usually involves a group of anywhere from like 10 to 13 riders, several familiar faces from the BDR that have been with us in all the movies since the beginning. And then recently we've tried to include more local riders, that helped create that particular route so they can be out there showing us their home turf in the field while we're making the movie. And, some of those are just your average everyday riders that have been riding on their own for years. And then others, we get some real sort of celebrity personalities from the motorcycling industry, famous racers or competitors or people like that.
And one of the things is, watching this and you're seeing like these very skilled riders tackling sometimes just beautiful roads and going through, I love going through some of the small towns you stop in, but then some very technical sections as well. And I'm thinking, yeah, it's great seeing them do it, but there's guys hauling all the gear doing this too. So I'm just curious, like for you, how do you manage that to be able to I guess you pre-ride the route and kind of have all your plans and then just being able to be there at the right places at the right moments to capture this. What's that process like?
Well, I've kind of made my specialty trying to be the guy that can film motorcycling independently. In other words, I can carry all my gear on my motorcycle. I can do the filming and I can do the riding. And that's, the combination that I built my business on. And when we do these BDR kind of trips, in general, everybody more or less does carry their own gear, their camping gear, cooking gear, sleeping gear. That's, we do it that way because that's the way people ride these routes. And I will say we have them set up with the idea that someone could camp an entire BDR route, that there's campgrounds and wild camping opportunities, or they could stay in small hotels and motels, B&Bs, things like that. So we kind of create these routes to give people options about, how they might want to do it. And then when we go out and film it, like I said, we try to camp as much as we can. Sometimes we do stay in cool lodging opportunities because we think that's interesting to show people what's out there and what's available. On some of the projects, we have found that it has been very helpful and advantageous for us to have some kind of a support vehicle. And the only reason that we do that, we don't, the average person certainly doesn't need a support vehicle. Just do it on your motorcycles and have a blast. But because we're such a large group of 10, 13 people, and we're out there filming and doing all of that, it has in some instances been easier to have someone be part of our team that has a Jeep and can come out and cook some food and things like that, so that it frees us up to work on the movie at the same time, because that's a lot of work.
And there was on this one, there was something I thought it was pretty funny, the bear spray incident.
Yeah.
Can you tell people about that?
Yeah, it was actually a couple of incidents rolled into one, and you can always count on Jocelyn Snow to bring a bunch of humor into a BDR ride. She is just so fun to ride with. It's such an awesome rider. Jocelyn Snow, for those of you who don't know her, she's she's a BMW GS trophy motorcyclist. She's a competitor, and she's short. She's not a tall rider. So she's on a 1200 GS, and she can really throw that big bike around. It's just inspiring to see her ride. That said, she did get into a situation in this ride where she got a little bit out of control, and she crashed her motorcycle, and it happens, no big deal. But she managed to puncture a can of bear spray in the process, and puncture the cylinder head covers on her motor. And so she's like laying on the side of the road with oil leaking out of her bike and bear spray spraying everywhere on her motor, on the people that are trying to help her, and everybody's coughing and sneezing and their eyes are burning. And at first they didn't even know what it was. They're just like, what the heck's going on? And it was just a little minor catastrophe on the road. Unfortunately, I wasn't there right when it happened, so I didn't get to film any of that. But I heard the stories, I saw the aftermath, and it was something else.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I've seen a lot of the BDR films, and it was my favorite because I think there was just more like personality in it this time. So that was really cool. But you go back a long time. You have your company called Noren Films. You've been doing motorcycle adventures for a while. How long have you been doing it? How did you get into it?
Well, I kind of got back into motorcycling as an adult when I was in my mid-20s. I rode little dirt bikes around the farm when I was a kid, and then didn't ride through college and all that. And when I was in my mid-20s, I kind of, for whatever reason, got back into motorcycling and started out as a street rider, but more touring. I liked to travel around the Northwest and go camping off my motorcycle, but strictly pavement riding. And after a few years of doing that, I kind of realized that there were some roads that I really wanted to explore, that I needed a different kind of motorcycle to go down some of these dirt roads. And that was right around the time I learned about BMW GS kind of off-road motorcycles. And 1998, they came out with their first chain drive BMW GS, which for a young person like me meant that it was a little bit less expensive than a bigger shaft drive GS. So I was able to get one, and that really took my motorcycling off into a new direction. And so I took that inspiration and started looking for ways that I could combine that with my career, which was film and video production. That's what I went to school for. And I was working for television stations and software companies, and just kind of in the corporate commercial film and video production realm. And I just started thinking, it'd be really, really cool if I could learn how to do this film and video stuff from, a motorcyclist perspective, and maybe start to document some of my journeys, because I hadn't seen any videos out there. When I was into other sports before that, like rock climbing or surfing or skateboarding, one of the things I would always do is watch videos that people had produced about those sports, because they were inspiring and funny, entertaining. And when I got into this kind of adventure motorcycling, I just didn't see any videos out there about it. I'm like, how do you learn about this? Where do you go to get inspired? Who's doing what? And I just thought, well, why don't I become that guy? Why don't I start filming rides? And so the challenge then was that I was kind of a newbie. I wasn't an expert. Who's going to listen to me? What do I have to tell the world? So that's when I partnered up with some real experts in the industry, and just kind of approached them and said, look, I've got some background in film and video. I'm not a motorcycling expert, but I'm really passionate about it, and I'm getting into it. And maybe we could collaborate. And with your expertise in the industry and my help doing some film and video, who knows what's possible. And so that's kind of where it started for me.
And would this be Globe Riders?
It would indeed. Yeah. The person in particular that I'm thinking about is Helge Peterson. Mm-hmm. He's a motorcyclist from Norway that lives in the USA, and he started a company called Globe Riders, and he leads really long expeditions around the world, like 60, 70-day tours across continents. And fortunately for me, he was living in Seattle, Washington, where I lived. And, he was just starting his company 20 years ago. And we kind of partnered up. We did some small projects together, filmed some short rides. And then within a couple years, he asked me if I wanted to go document the Globe Riders World Tour. And I said, what's that? He said, well, it's 65 days long. We're going to start in Beijing. We'll ride across China and then Russia, and we'll end in Munich 11,000 miles later.
Oh,
You want to come along?
Dream. So I'm curious. Something about your films, you're just always getting the right shot. And I can tell that you're not only, you know what you're doing, but you prepare yourself. I'm curious, what are some of the craziest things you've done to get the perfect shot?
Well, it always involves trying to stay ahead of the pack, to be in position when the riders go by, to get a kind of shot like that, because it's one thing to put a helmet camera on your helmet and ride down the road and get that shot. But I've always tried to make my videos stand out or be a little more than that, and to go for a classic documentary style. So I'll go out on my bike ahead of everyone, set up my tripod, sit and wait for the group to go by. And sometimes that just works really smoothly. Most of the time it doesn't. And that has been one of the biggest challenges for me, especially in filming a big group ride, is kind of doing that process. What happens is, if the group isn't really on the same page with me as a filmmaker, they have a tendency to want to just ride the ride, understandably. And they don't want to necessarily stop and do all the picture taking. And so if I get ahead and film a shot of them going by, that might be the last time I see them until lunch, because by the time I pack up and get everything on my bike and take off, they're ahead of me. And if they don't stop again, I don't see them. And so part of my job is to really communicate clearly with the group that I'm riding with what the expectations are when it comes to the filmmaking. And, if we can do that, then it can be a much better movie. And that's what we do on the BDR. We're out there specifically to make a movie. And so we have really clear communication about how that works. And the riders know that it's hurry up and wait. They've got to be directed to do something, and then they've got to sit and wait. And that's the only way it can work. On the Globe Riders trips, it was a completely different scenario, because they're customers on a commercial tour. They're just out to have fun. And I'm just trying to keep up as best as I can within all that madness, and sometimes riding my own motorcycle, sometimes in a chase vehicle. But it always starts trying to stay up ahead of the group, trying to get those shots. I'm often on the side of the road, crouched in bushes, or up on the side of a hill on rocks, or laying in the dirt, any number of, it's a very physical thing to get those shots. And then, I've often rode on a variety of different vehicles to try to get some action shots as well. I've ridden on the back of motorcycles, hanging off the back end, filming backwards, or hanging off the side of a sidecar, or hanging out the door of a van, or, you name it. I've probably been in some kind of precarious situations.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
You got your own challenges going on.
Uh-huh.
I've got a question for you as a filmmaker, and especially filming motorcyclists. There has to be occasions where somebody might be in an accident, right? And I'm curious, what's your first instinct, to go to help or to film?
Well, it depends on the scenario. If it's just me and somebody else out there and they're hurt, absolutely, my instinct is going to be to help them. But just safety, no matter what, takes a priority. And that, for me, even starts before someone gets hurt. Safety is number one, whether it's, how I think about filming a shot. I have to pull off on the side of the road and set my camera up, and I want to make sure that I'm doing that in a safe spot where I'm not blocking traffic, or someone's going to come around a corner and my bike's going to be parked in the wrong spot. So I'm always thinking about safety in that sense. But when we do have those accidents, safety comes first. But usually what happens is there's a lot of other people involved, and there's a lot of people handling what needs to be handled. I don't have particular medical skills, but some of the trips I've been on, we have people that are more qualified than me to help someone that's down and has maybe broken a foot or injured their leg or whatever. And so, I try to stay out of the way and let the people that need to do what they're doing, do what they need to do, basically. And, it's a harder question for me is like, how and what do I film in those scenarios? Because, nobody likes to look bad or be laying on the ground with a camera in their face. And so I'm not trying to take advantage of anyone or exploit anyone. But, at the same time, if someone's not hurt too badly and if it's not life threatening, I'll definitely film it, because I also want people to know that the risks involved and what the reality is with motorcycling, so that, because that's kind of the background of what this sport, it just entails. So, it's a balance. It's a balance of like knowing what the right thing is to do. And I figure too, at the end, I don't have to use anything. I can film everything I want to, and then make those choices about what to use later in the editing room. But I can't do it the other way around. If I don't film something, I can't choose to use it. So I generally just try to stay out of the way, do my best, film things, and then, make something that kind of embodies the challenges and the risks in the right way.
Now, there's a lot of work that goes into making a film. I think for people who enjoy film, if it's done well, you don't realize how much work, because you guys make it look so easy. But you gotta film. You got lots of cameras, different equipment, drones, and you got audio, and then you still have to score and edit the whole thing. So how long is a process to film and edit something like this?
Well, it is quite a process, like you mentioned. I mean, just being out in the field and capturing all the material is a completely different job in and of its own than sitting back in the editing studio and making those choices. And I, frankly, I love them both. I love the visceral, raw, physical activities about being in the field and the weather and the challenges and of the ride. And then I also love coming back home to my studio where it's clean and orderly, and I have a cup of coffee and I'm just looking at all of that drama on the screen. And it's just, for me, it's like it fulfills two different sides of my brain to be able to do it that way. But the editing process generally takes me much longer than the actual filming process. So if I go and film a BDR movie that maybe was 8 days of filming in the field, it could very likely take me 8 weeks of editing to put it all together.
8 weeks sounds fast. That's a lot of work.
It's because I've been doing it for a long time. I'm pretty fast at it now, I guess, but it takes a lot of time to be able to put something together. And that's just the way it is. You've got to go through all the footage. You've got to sort of cull it down, get rid of the stuff that's obviously not going to be in it, then start to make some harder choices about, well, what's better than this scene or that scene. And the further you get, as your film gets more and more fine tuned, those choices get harder and harder to make right up to the very end, because when you get to the fine cut, everything you're looking at is pretty good. It's made it that far in the journey because it's really good material. And if you need to shave off that extra 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you're killing your children. You're cutting things out that you don't want to necessarily lose, but it probably makes it even better movie in the end.
Well, and I think it's smart of you too, that when you're doing your pre-ride, that you're grabbing a lot of the B-roll then where you have the time to do it. That I found is something that I never seem to have enough of, is B-roll. You never know what you're going to need or when. And so it's great that you figured out to do that, and it takes a lot of the stress off. I think we have a question from the gallery. Shauna, you got a question there?
We do. And sorry, I'm over here balancing some kids and got chickens squawking in the background. So actually, it's quite the zoo over here. So Rodney, one of our viewers, from listening to your conversation, says that it sounds like you spend a lot of time thinking about the filming side, and he's curious if you ever just switch over to just focusing on the riding and taking a break from filming, and how in the editing process does that ultimately affect your filming?
Yeah, that's a good question. I get asked that one a lot because, as most of you know, when you try to document your vacation or your trip, whether whatever level you're trying to do that at, it really affects your journey. If you decide you want to journal or make a diary or take pictures, or you're going to write an article or do a blog, before you know it, you're spending more time working on that rather than just living in the journey itself. But for me, I find that the filmmaking that I do on these journeys, it feels like it gives them a higher purpose. In other words, I've taken plenty of motorcycle trips where I haven't filmed anything, and I've just went out and camped and rode and had a pretty great time doing it. But I actually find more fulfillment when I'm doing the same thing, but I'm actually filming it and trying to tell a story and trying to turn it into something. It just, that extra layer of creativity and those choices and challenges along the way really elevate the whole experience for me. So yeah, it changes it, absolutely. But for me, it just makes it more purposeful, more meaningful.
Well, and I also wanted to give a plug, because not only are you doing these BDR films, you also have a YouTube channel with a lot of great content on there and a lot of different series. You really stay busy. One of the ones that I found to be really cool is called Riding Solo. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah. So, my YouTube channel, I started that like 10 years ago. And in the beginning, it was basically just a place to put movie trailers for other projects that I was involved in. And over the years, I would do a few little videos here and there, but it wasn't until really about 2 years ago that I decided I wanted to put some effort into my YouTube channel. And the project that I did last year, sorry, this is beeping. I'll try to turn it off here. So last year I decided, I just wanted to keep it simple and bring it all back to the basics and just go out and film a simple movie or series of videos riding solo, riding by myself. And part of the reason is that, I'd been doing these BDR projects and a number of other group rides, for quite some time, and they're challenging. It's really difficult to wrangle that many people together and get them all on the same page and go out and film things. And a lot of times I end up feeling like, as a filmmaker, I wasn't necessarily able to do as good of a job as I wanted to, because there's always some pressure of a timetable or a schedule, or we have to be there. And I'm always feeling kind of frustrated, like, wow, I wish I had more time to spend in this location to really, film this campsite the way it needs to be filmed, or film this section of the ride the way it needs to be filmed. And so I decided I would just take off by myself and give myself unlimited permission and time to film my own adventure ride the way that I wanted to, with no limitations and no expectations about where I needed to get to or how fast I needed to go. I would just stop as often as I want, film as often as I want. And that was just kind of really my agenda. So I took off last summer, and it ended up becoming a 6,000 mile, 30-day ride from my home in Southern Arizona up to Montana and back. And it was pretty much the same routine every day. And this was during the middle of the pandemic, I might say too. So it kind of fit with that whole mindset of like being isolated. I was riding by myself. I was camping every night on the trip, and I was cooking my own breakfast and dinner at my campsite every night. So I basically would ride into town once a day, hit a little supermarket, get some gas, and then get back out into the backcountry and camp out. And then I'd get up in the morning and I'd do it again. And so I tried to capture as much of the scenic beauty of the riding as I could through my 3 different cameras, which would be my GoPro, my mirrorless camera where I set it on a tripod on the side of the road, film myself riding by, stop, go back, pick it up, and then my drone. And I put a lot of effort into the drone photography. I wanted to learn how to be a better drone pilot, and spent a lot of time doing that. And I think that came out really well in this series. So that's kind of what the videos are. They're cinematic riding through different landscapes, and then some really cool camping scenes. I made a point to find as beautiful campsites as I could, to film them, at the right time of day when the lighting was really nice in the evening or in the morning. And kind of to wrap it all up, the sort of unique or surprising thing that I brought into this project that I've never really focused on before was food and cooking. Mm. And I really tried to elevate my cooking game and cook some really good meals out in the backcountry by myself, just to kind of inspire people and show them that you don't have to live off of fast food or freeze-dried food or whatever, that you can eat some pretty good healthy meals. And that's kind of the way I like to eat. And so I spent some time kind of perfecting some of those things as well in that series.
Well, and I want to make sure people know how to find some of these things. So if you want to watch any of the BDR films, what's the best place for them to go?
If they go to the BDR website, it's probably the best consolidated place to get all that info, and that's ridebdr.com. But just so they know, those films are available either on the Vimeo platform or on Amazon.
Yeah, please spread the word. If you like the films, tell everyone, because that's one of the things we find with doing the film festival. People say, these are great films. I didn't know where to find them. All we're doing is curating things that are out there, and you're one of the people who's been making them. Same with your YouTube series. Where's the best place for people to find you there?
If they just Google my name, they'll probably come across it, but it's officially called the Motorcycle Travel Channel on YouTube.
And then there's one more plug, I think, for anyone who's traveling through Arizona, specifically wonderful Bisbee, Arizona. Where can they find you there?
Yeah, Bisbee, awesome little town. We are the southernmost mile-high city in the United States, elevation 5,300 feet. We're about 8 miles north of the border with Mexico. And we have a little vintage motel. It's called the Jonquil Motel. It was built in the 1930s right here on historic Highway 80, which used to be the main southernmost transcontinental highway between Georgia and California. And so this little 7-room motel has been here since the 1930s. And now we kind of call it our motorcycle motel because we get a lot of motorcyclists that come down here, park their bikes in our courtyard, hang out in our motel. We've got a big, beautiful backyard where we have overland campers and van campers, a stage, a sauna. We do events. Sometimes we have a bar. So it's kind of like a hub for overland motorcycle travelers down here in southern Arizona. And it's called the Jonquil Motel, Jonquil. And jonquil is a type of a daffodil, just if you're curious. But the original owner, his name was John Quill. And so that's why it's called the Jonquil.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing some of your stories. I could just keep talking forever. There's so many questions I have because you have such a long history doing this. Thank you for doing that too. Again, having these films and being able to introduce them to people who didn't know where to find them is a gift to us, but it's really coming from you. So don't forget, if you're traveling near Arizona, stop in at the Jonquil Motel. I think it's great. And we'll be looking forward to what's coming next, maybe for another film festival.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for doing what you're doing. I love you guys. You're doing great work, and just keep at it. Okay.
Thank you so much. Well, we're going to get to our next, and you have a good day.
All right. Bye, everyone.
All right. See ya. So coming up, this is Brenna and Kyle, and I'm so glad to have them on here. If you guys have been watching the films, there's no doubt you've seen Fast Eddie, which won the winner is the best ultra short. Congratulations on that. It tied with another great film that we're going to be interviewing the filmmaker in an hour. But Fast Eddie, what a great film. So I wanted to thank you guys for coming on and sharing the story about this film. I love this one. It's really one of the favorites of the festival.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you guys. So excited. And when you sent the email, let alone to be selected and then to be able to tie, and be, I think, recognized is just like, we're over the moon to have gotten that email from you.
It is cool. So can you give a brief description of what the movie is about?
I can. So Fast Eddie is, the tagline that we came up with was, it's a short film about a lifelong passion. It is I guess I'd say like a small, like, biodoc that's really just like a slice of, a slice of a window into the world of Ed Fisher, who Ed is actually, how old is Ed now? Because
I think he'll be 97 in this June.
What?
Yeah.
93? I think maybe 93. Not
No, I think he was. Well, I mean, he was 95 when we did it, or
Okay,
93
maybe
when we
I'm-
did it.
Now I'm like
Maybe I don't.
93 when.
93,
Okay, so
96.
Wow.
Maybe 96. Yes. Clearly, though, I don't want Ed to age, and I think that's also in my mind. It's like frozen in time. But
doesn't quite matter because he acts like he's 15.
this is true.
So.
This is true. So I mean, essentially, I can just tell you guys kind of a little bit about the origin story as to how like we met Ed, and I'll just jump right in because that was like Kyle had read, and it was an article online, and there was a photo that Kyle had found, and it was Ed out front basically at a ride, like somewhere in rural Pennsylvania. And Kyle was really taken by the photo and came and showed it to me and was like, look at this guy. Look at I mean, how old do you think this guy is? Look at this guy still riding, and obviously like at the front of the pack. And we were both
I
just.
think it was a race actually.
It was a race.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think it was a race. And I mean, had his racing leathers on in that image, and both of us were just like really taken by it. And I instantly was like, we have to meet this person. Like, we have to just know who this is. So I kind of pride myself, I think, as being a little bit of an internet sleuth, even when people aren't online. And clearly Ed, being in his 90s, is not necessarily, he's not very active online. So it took a little bit of hunting down to locate him, and ended up reaching out to a gentleman who essentially, I mean, was practically a producer on the project as well. That we couldn't have found Ed without Frank Watson. So Frank's voice is in the piece, and I tracked down another image of Ed, because he lives in Shunk, which is like a very tiny town, one stop sign town in Pennsylvania. And I messaged Frank on Facebook and said, I think that you might know who this man is. I have to meet this man. And I was like, we'd love to have the opportunity to talk with him, and if he's up for it, make a short film about him, because we were inspired just by his image. Cut to us having that opportunity, Frank introducing us, and once getting to know Ed, I feel like that inspiration has only continued, and we were really like in awe from the moment that we met him. Like Kyle said, even though he's in his 90s, he doesn't act like it at all. You'd still think that he bought his first motorcycle. You'd still think he was 16 or 17. If you talk to him and you talk about riding, I mean, it's his entire life. He just lights up.
Yeah, and actually, part of his history, I mean, he's a AMA Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
He won the 1953 Laconia 100-mile national championship. I mean, this is like hardcore riding back in the day. Hardcore shit, right?
Yeah, hardcore. And he was the first Triumph factory rider on the East Coast.
Yeah.
So it was like, we didn't know that, when we saw that image of him. And one of the things, I mean, he's such a humble human anyway. But then it's like you dig in a little bit more, and it was like, that was one of the first things when we met Frank, when I asked Frank, so can you tell me a little bit about Ed, before I had an opportunity to talk to Ed. And Frank was just like, he's a legend. Like, he's an absolute legend. And he doesn't see himself that way. He's so humble. And yeah, I mean, his accolades, it's wild, like to see like ribbons and trophies that he has in his garage. But that's not what he would show you first if you showed up. He'd want to show you the last bike that he bought from somebody, like that someone called him up and said, hey, what kind of bike is this? Like, and he'd want to also sit and talk to you about riding. Like, what do you like about riding? Like, he's just like such a humble and like just fascinating human.
And it's one thing to see somebody that age out riding a bike, but he was kick-starting bikes too. I was like, what?
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
What a cool guy.
Yeah.
So, I know that you kind of have a history of this. Tell me a little more about Heyday Union.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm honestly, right now we've kind of taken a little bit of a pause on it because it was at just before the start of the pandemic. But the idea when we met Ed, the idea was that we would create films where people of different generations who had a shared passion would be able to connect, like as it relates to whatever that passion is. And we looked at Ed and riding as like hopefully the first of many of those. And to date we haven't made any other films like in that I'd say like within that same like kind of framework, but it's certainly on our radar for us to continue it. But it was something that when we premiered Fast Eddie in the town of Canton, which is like right next to Shunk, also a tiny town, we also had a ride that we had kind of coordinated. And I want to say that, it was one of those things where we didn't know, obviously, like we didn't do an RSVP and weren't sure how many people would show up for that ride. And it was like, 7 a.m. start in downtown Canton, and then like kind of a loop some country roads, and then back. When we come back, we'd go to the tiny theater and premiere Fast Eddie for everyone. And what was so interesting was like people just kept coming. Like, it was like 7 o'clock. It was like just a steady stream of bikes, and we had over 100 bikes show up. And I mean, it was a testament to Ed and like the impact that he's had like on the community. But at the same time, what was just like, I mean, at least for me, it definitely goes down as like one of like the top 10 days I feel like in my life, where you could just feel an energy between a bunch of people and like a bunch of like just love, like passion for riding, also like curiosity for, like between each other.
Well, I think it's important to note too that for Brenna and I, Ed from the beginning has always kind of represented to us ultimately like he's an example of the goal, like whether you ride motorcycles or not, or if you're into hot air balloons or
whatever it is,
planes. The goal is like to be able to do it until you can't do it anymore, and hopefully that's as long as Ed has had. I mean, he's on a Can-Am Spider. I think that's like his latest and greatest favorite thing. And it was funny because I talked to his wife Susie in like mid-March, and they were leaving Shunk, and she was saying that he couldn't dig the trailer out to put the Can-Am Spider on the trailer, so they had to leave it in Pennsylvania, and he was so sad that he wasn't going to have this thing in Florida
for the spring.
He's got one speed, and it's and
it's on.
Going.
Yeah, he's got one speed, and it's just on all the time.
That's funny. So I'm curious, this whole mission to connect old and young people. Are you maybe going to stay with motorcycles, and can we expect maybe another AMA Hall of Famer?
I'd love to.
It's a good question. I mean, honestly, if you know of anyone that you think has a great story, like feel free to send them our way. I've reached out to, when was that? Well, it was just before the pandemic. There was a woman named Mary McGee. Yeah. I reached out to Mary McGee because I mean, she's a badass for sure. And I was just curious to know more about her story. I think a fair amount of folks reach out to her. So we'll see, but it's honestly, it's like she popped up in my feed and I was like, I need to connect back with her.
There's a lot of them though. Like,
there are.
I mean, I became friends with a guy named Jim Varnes who raced for BSA in the 60s, and he's a good friend of Ed's. And Jim is nearing 80, but he still, I think he's like 79 this year. And I talk to him quite often. We're always talking on the phone about bikes and different things. But his grandson, he builds flat track motors for his grandson, who is the third generation of professional flat track racer. And so, it's like it starts with Ed, and then it goes, I'm trying to think of who else.
Well, Ed is
I've
just,
talked to
Ed has just been like
a lot of different people.
a connector, because we actually ended up buying one of Ed's bikes that's kind of like near and dear like to us, and Jim Barnes was restoring it for us in Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
super cool.
Well, and one of the things I also enjoyed about the movie, you had a lot of old footage in there. I was curious.
Oh yeah.
How you got that?
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. That's a like kind of a fun anecdote. I took all the facts that Ed had given me, as well as like Susie and even Frank, some of the history like that they knew of, like in Ed's background, and then it was like a dive into YouTube to see what was actually out there. And one of the coolest things was that the footage that you see, I mean, I remember Kyle was actually at another shoot, and I was home. I want to say it was like 1 a.m. that I was sitting there like just because I became a little bit obsessed. Like, I have to find it. I know there's footage out there. And really awesome was because I remember watching it's the clip where you see him like push the bike, and I can tell by his walk, because he had broken his leg and he has like a very distinct walk, that I was like, that's Ed right there. I was like, and I just started crying when I found it on YouTube, and then sent it over to my friend Brian, who's the editor, who we collaborated with. And the best part was when we premiered the film, Ed had no idea that any of that footage was out in the world. And he was like, I mean, I would say Susie, his wife, I mean, she was like in tears, because she also had never seen that footage. And when I asked Ed, you remember that? I leaned over and I was like, because I was right near him, and I was like, what do you think about that? And he was like, that's pretty great. That's pretty great. Like, it's like footage from you from, like 70, like so odd years ago. But it was, I mean, that's like the power of the internet. It's just fascinating that somebody had that footage, and I was able to comb through everything and pick out exactly where I could see him walking. I noticed like his head tilt and things like that. And I was like, that's totally him. That's so crazy.
Well, and one thing I would ask is that, can we get a Fast Eddie part 2? I want more of him.
Yeah.
He's such a character.
I mean, they, there's when we were looking for him, Brenna had kind of said to me, don't get your hopes up. Like,
I was really nervous.
He may have passed, and we don't want you to get too excited. And but there's all these different forums online, and there's different like anecdotes about a guy who's riding through this little town, and he meets this old timer, and he says to follow him back to his garage, and he can't keep up with this old timer because he's going so fast. And there's like all these little things. And I mean, they house, there's a group of Canadian riders that once a year comes to their house. They're always opening their doors to, different people passing through. And, it's one of those things where like, he is a bit of a legend. But it's almost like after seeing the film, if you're in the area, you can. Oh yeah, you can find it.
Anyone who ever stop by Shunk. Like, if anyone's that's outside of, well, I'd say, what is that? That's east of Philly, northeast of Philly, like in that area. Like, look up Shunk, and everyone in Shunk knows who Ed is. Ed Fisher, and I mean, he 100%. His garage is, I forgot what the number.
Fox Motorsports.
Yeah,
well, you can
see it on the outside, but I mean, it's literally, you could just walk up and knock on the door, and everyone calls him Fast Eddie. Like, everyone in town calls him Fast Eddie. So he's very used to, he's well known as that.
So just pull up to the stop sign and ask around.
Yeah.
I think they within the last year they got a stoplight. That was like a big thing.
They did.
The big to do.
But there's no cell service or anything. I mean, you drive up there and it's like everything goes dark, and you just follow the road until you.
So I'm curious, how was it to film him? What technique did you use for getting him on the road? Were you using a truck? Were you on a bike? How did you get there?
Frank Watson piloted a sidecar.
That Ed has. A bike with a sidecar that Ed has.
And he had never... I didn't know Frank when I got inside the sidecar. It was like Frank had never piloted a sidecar before. and they're a lot different than a two-wheeled bike. And he took it around the road, around the block, so to speak, and he said he felt comfortable enough. And then Ed had kind of assured me he was Frank is also a pilot. He flies planes professionally as well, and so I got in this thing, and we did some shooting out the back of a sidecar, among other things. We shot off the side of the road and different stuff, but the sidecar was a huge help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I just imagine, like, he was just not willing to wait for you? Was he just
Yeah,
always
that was pretty tough, I'd say, from time to time.
Yeah.
To get him to slow down is really tough, or to do something, a second time. But I mean, in that way, I feel like Kyle is truly great, with his instincts of, just like following Ed for sure. So
Yeah, gotta be ready.
yeah, you got to be ready. Exactly. Because Ed's not going to wait for you.
I also, one of the other things I really liked, besides having that old footage, the filters you were using to kind of blend the two, so it wasn't such a harsh contrast between new film and old film.
Mm-hmm.
Whose decision making was that?
I think that was. I mean, we both talked about.
Yeah, we talked about it because for us, it was kind of this idea that as us being younger, like capturing things digitally, but then using film as an homage a little bit to to Ed's generation. And so there's definitely a couple times where when the way that it's cut, where we tried to cut back to back, just so that you could, hopefully that kind of comes across. Yeah, I mean, I'd say we both we chatted about that, as well as Brian, who's a longtime friend of mine and a fantastic editor. So it was really a team effort, and the us including audio at the top was a little bit of I think in a perfect world, and as most short films, had we had a little bit better of a budget, we would have interviewed more people, but it was also a little bit tricky because some of those folks are older, and so for me it was just a matter of I'd rather just have had their the bite and the context from them, and so it was that was also just really, really fun to have. I feel like everyone that I talked to, it was over a 2-hour conversation, and instantly all the men that you hear kind of become 15 years old when they talk about Ed as being their heroes.
And those, I mean, a lot of the people that Brenna talked to are racers and winners in their own right. And I mean, it was interesting because it was out of necessity that you talked to him on the phone, but it tied in well thematically with this thought of you're calling up all these people that Ed knows all over the country.
Very different places.
They have nothing but really good things to say about the man. And again, tying into this whole in the twilight of your life, you could only be so lucky to have a bunch of people on the phone, have such nice things to say about you.
That's really cool. I think we have a question from the gallery. Shauna, what do you have for us?
Rodney wanted to know, he's asking for a little bit of self-introspection. Watching Fast Eddie made him realize that there might be a lot of years left for him to be active if he chooses to do that. So did your experience with Ed and creating the film, did that prompt you to choose to do something different, or your work or life after meeting with him and learning what Fast Eddie's all about?
That's a good question.
Yeah, do you want to go first?
I mean, yeah, I think I think about Ed a lot. And, I mean, I don't get to talk to him as much as I'd like, but yeah, I think about, it's almost like what would Fast Eddie do kind of thing, and Brenna and I decided to take instead of going on a honeymoon when we got married, we ended up taking a cross-country trip via sidecar with our dog. And that was something that, all along the way, it was really hard and a huge challenge, and weather and trying to keep our dog warm. But I think, the biggest compliment that we had with the whole trip was when the last time we saw Ed, he had seen some photos, and we had sent him some photos of our trip, and he was so proud of us and so
Impressed.
so excited that like I learned how to pilot a sidecar, and and so yeah, I mean, I think, and not just with motorcycles. I mean, I think about Ed's the kind of person that definitely would stop if there was somebody got a flat tire on the side of the road. He is take the shirt off his back type of person, and that's how he lives his life. And I think, yeah, for me it was inspiration to have more friends than enemies, and even your enemies somehow love you. And that, I think, just a way to live. The way that he lives is something that I aspire to be.
Yeah, and I don't know. I feel like I can definitely echo a lot of that sentiment. I mean, for me, being that I've just always been a passenger on a bike, but what I love about motorcycles is I just really love the community and the connection between people. And that instantly, it's like, if you show up on two wheels somewhere, and someone sees you have a helmet, and somebody else has a helmet in their hand, and you're friends with that person. And I think that for me, one of the things I've learned from Ed, the entire experience with Ed in particular, that the day when we premiered was, really like wringing out the washcloth of life, like every drop that you possibly can get, and realizing how all of your actions, when you are kind to someone, how that really does make an impact. And I think I've always, morbid or not, I've always really thought about, what will people say at my funeral? And I think it's like, the whole experience with Ed, it was such a gift to witness while he's alive, all of these people like celebrating him. And I think that that's something that I kind of learned from him, was that, you should, if someone does something nice for you, or if you feel a certain way about someone, you should tell them, you should tell them. And if you feel that you have some kind of connection to somebody else, also acknowledging that. And because I think that that's something he and Kyle in particular, I think have really become Kyle would say that Ed is one of his best friends. And that's such a it's so fascinating that, you would say as a 35-year-old man that, he's got a best friend who's almost 100 years old.
I feel like we've and I mean, maybe the hate union thing, we've always enjoyed older people.
Yeah. That's something that we kind of connected on, I think, early in our relationship.
I was just talking to a friend. He was talking, I got coffee with a friend, and we both rode to the coffee shop, and he was talking about got to make my 5-year-old self proud. And he shared with me that his sister had some complications, and he decided to buy his dream bike, which was I think a brand new Honda Africa Twin, and he was going to ride to Kansas and see her. And he was like, I got to make my 5-year-old self proud. And Brenna and I always talk about our 12-year-old self being proud.
Yeah.
And so, we kind of brought that back. But I think that it's important to also think about your 93-year-old self.
Yeah.
And make, so that when you look back on your life, you're proud about what you've done, and you're happy about the paths that you've chosen.
And the people you met along the way, I think, too.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I wanted to thank you guys for coming on for this interview, but also for making such a great film and participating in our film festival. I only hope that through this, you're realizing what a huge market there is for motorcycle film. The motorcycle community can't get enough. And I love what you did, bringing just a great little nugget of a story. Somebody who may have thought he was, long past and forgotten about, found that gem and shared it, and everybody's loving it. So I only hope to see more come from you, and maybe in one of our future film festivals.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Us
much.
too. Thank you guys. Thanks so much. And thanks back to the both of you, and, everyone, I think, for being an advocate for, for films in general. Because I think that appetite definitely as creators kind of comes back and makes it, it perks up in me, where I'm like, I need to reach out to Mary. We need to see what we're going to do next. So thanks for that. It's a little bit like a kick in the butt, I think, too, to do it. So
No problem. And I'll definitely stay in touch with you. I have a lot of contacts myself, and maybe
awesome.
pitch some ideas to you.
Yeah,
That would be
that
great.
sounds like a great plan. I love that.
Cool. Well, thank you guys very much. You're welcome to exit or stay in. We've got a great film we're about to talk about. I don't know if you guys saw the It's Worth It, a dirt bike engine rebuild, the stop motion engine rebuild.
Didn't.
No.
Oh, it's amazing. We're about to get into that. Yeah, you definitely got to check it out.
We will.
I'm trying to see what kind of bikes you got in the background there. You got a lot of stuff, huh?
It goes around the room, actually.
Oh my
All
goodness.
4 walls.
Too bad you can't ride those though, right?
Well, I've got plenty of those in the garage too that I can.
You had a tiny little hamster that could then ride, set them up on all of those bikes.
I know. Well, thank you guys.
again.
Thank you
Thank you
guys.
guys very much.
Thank you guys.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
All right. So we got Nick Hagman coming up next. As I said, It's Worth It, a dirt bike engine rebuild. I hope you guys have all seen this one. This was another one of my favorites to bring into the festival for a couple of reasons. One, because it's not like anything I've seen before in the motorcycle community. And 2, because you could tell that there was so much work that was put into it. Really unique film. Hopefully he's here. Nick Hagman, are you here with us?
I'm in. I'm here. Yeah.
Hey, there you are.
Yeah.
How you
hearing
doing?
me clear and everything?
Yeah, I can hear you good.
Okay, good.
Dude, there's so many questions. So many questions about this. First time filmmaker for reals?
Well, it's my 4th stop motion animated video that I've done.
Yeah. I was actually going to get into the others because it was interesting to see the arc of the quality getting better, but still where you're at with this film is like somebody who was doing this for decades.
It sometimes felt like it took decades. No, thank you. And everything that you need to learn is out there between YouTube and the instruction manual, which you have to open from time to time when you're doing this stuff. And it was just a matter of taking as much time as it took to do it as good as I wanted to do it. And there's one piece of software in particular that I couldn't have done it without. And for $300, it's not cheap, but for $300, you're getting the same thing that any professional stop motion video uses. So like all the Leica series, they've got like the Paranorman and Box Trolls and Coraline, all these movies I've never actually watched, but I've watched all their behind the scenes and how they do it. But those are Hollywood, releases, and they're shot with the same program that I used. So that helped a lot.
Interesting. Well, for anyone who has not yet seen it, can you give a brief description of what your movie is?
My movie is, it is an engine rebuild, but told as a story. And the storyline is the hero's journey.
Yes.
I came to this, you were talking about the progression of my videos. My videos basically went from holy crap, I figured out how to do stop motion animation to let's bring some of these things to life with stop motion animation to let's tell a story and make a proper short film using stop motion animation. And I needed a storyline, and the hero's journey is one of the oldest storylines ever. But it's a piston that is summoned to lead the rebuild of the engine that he will go on to live in. And, the piston is kind of the most commonly known, or like every part of an engine is important, but it's, one of the most commonly known and important parts of the engine. So that felt like the right thing to make the main character.
Yeah, it seems like watching the earlier ones, even the first, I guess the first one was the breakdown of the bike being a KX250.
I did a shock rebuild was my
the
first
shock
one.
rebuild. Okay, was the first one.
Yeah. And then it was that breakdown where you start to see a little more character, you know, with the flying parts and the front suspension bouncing. And that was bringing a little more character to things on my second one. Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. The first one is more about the mechanics. And then as you get into the engine or the bike rebuild, right away, first thing comes in is a flying T-handle wrench. I'm like, how did he do that? Like, what?
Well, so the idea for that, you know, I was pretty into airplanes as a kid, and one of the airplane type toys is the little spin propeller things. So yeah, you spin them and the propeller goes flying. And every time I ever held a T-handle, I found myself kind of spinning it like that and making helicopter noises. And so the idea for the flying T-handle kind of came from that. But how I did it, the stop motion, the way I'm doing it, and anything where things appear to fly.
Yeah.
The basic idea is if your camera doesn't move, your lighting stays exactly the same, and you have a good picture of the background. There's a little tripod that I had to set up on that held that T-handle upright at first and then angled over as it was removing bolts. But if you have a clean background picture with the same lighting and the camera doesn't move, I can take the picture with the T-handle, draw around the T-handle, and remove, you know, I don't use Photoshop, but we'd call it photoshopping. You Photoshop out the
so you're
tripod or whatever is used
two.
to hold it in place.
That was brilliant. I mean, right out of the gate, you're going for hard stuff.
Well, you know, I got into it because I could see what I wanted to do. I had it all kind of figured out in my mind. And that's the stuff that makes people say, wow, or it's the stuff that I thought was cool. The bring it to life, flying and all that. But yeah, you know, there's thousands of pictures in each one of these videos, and at least half or more of those thousands of pictures, I'm drawing lines around T-handles or whatever it may be to remove whatever's holding it in place to make it look like it's flying.
So let's go back to the beginning, because there's a history with this bike. It's personal to you. Can you tell that story?
At one point while I was in high school, I was looking seriously at getting into being a motorcycle mechanic. You know, I've spent more time working on bikes than I ever have riding them. I'm finally starting to make a little headway in riding time, but I was always into working on them. And this bike I found as a basket case and just bought it in a whole bunch of different pieces, and I rebuilt it and got it back to functioning and decent looking order, but functioning order. And just so happened that a family member of mine was looking to buy something and bought it from me. And he had it for probably 10 years or a little more. And from what I could tell, took decent care of it. But then he passed it along to my cousin, who did nothing but, you know, put gas in it, kick it over, and just, you know, ring the thing until it died. And that piston that you see in the video, the old one with all the scuffs and the score marks on it, that is how it came out of the engine. That engine, when I picked it up from my cousin and told him what I was up to, I said, do not clean the bike, you know, leave it filthy and dirty, you know, don't don't decide now to finally take care of the thing, leave it as it is. And that's how it all came apart, was just nasty and run down like that.
So you had the hero's journey, but you didn't include the villain, your cousin.
Yeah, well, you know, it was hard to get him to hold still for enough pictures, you know.
Yeah, so let's even talk about that. So how long did it take to film this movie?
The number that I've been throwing out, I didn't keep like a log of it or anything, probably because I didn't want to know how much time I was spending on it. But I can safely say that I have 500 hours into this video between the setup, the shooting, the editing, recording sound effects, and all the steps that go into it. And that was done within a calendar year. I mean, the whole pandemic really helped me in that. Gave me, when I needed to be at home and doing something, I had something to do all the time, you know?
And I even noticed watching your videos that another thing that got even better was the lighting. This was
Yes.
very well lit. I'm just curious, like, what's the setup that you're using, and what space were you filming this in?
So I had 1/4 of the garage that was curtained off. I had to go and buy a black curtain. You know, I mentioned earlier, you have to control the light, because if the light changes from shot to shot, it flickers, you know, brighter one and then darker the next. And shadows, I have to be standing in the same spot. If you look really close at some of the shots, you can see on the wrenches flashes of green. I was wearing a green shirt and standing just a little different. And in those wrenches, you can see a little flash of the green.
Now I got to go back and watch.
Yeah. So I mean, that every little bit matters. But the lighting, so I've got a black curtain and 2 walls. So I'm completely, you know, isolated in there as far as the light goes. And then I've got 2 lights off the ceiling and 1 that I would move around as needed to get up closer or be more direct. But yeah, the lighting took a lot of work. I mean, all of it takes a lot of work, but when you're working with metal parts, if the light's in the wrong spot, you're going to have a really nasty reflection. And you want to be able to see the right parts, all those little scratches on the piston or in the cylinder. Yeah, there was a lot to it, and I got way better at the lighting.
Yeah. The other thing I really appreciated is how you animated, like you were able to take this inanimate object, this piston, and give it like, as not just a story, but emotion, but even something as simple as when the manual comes in and it's like swimming in.
Yeah.
I love those details.
Thank you. It's cool. You don't always hear back on things like that and know what people are noticing or not. I spent a lot of time just sitting there looking at stuff and, you know, what's this thing move like? What's it look like? Or like what kind of, the manual in my mind, it's like, okay, he basically moves like a fish. And there was the crankcase splitter tool that, you know, he's got his little legs that he lands on and scoots around on. And you try to kind of take any chance you can to, like I say, making the manual like a fish, something from real life. And then you at least know what you're going for. And if you have an idea what you're going for, you're not always going to nail it, but you'll get something interesting and eye-catching.
The other thing that really lends to the story, like the piston's hesitation to go back into the cylinder, I think a lot of that had to do with the score. And can you tell me about how you developed that?
I didn't. I went online and I found a forum. You know, there's a forum for every hobby out there. Well, there's a forum for guys that like to do film scores. And I figured that if I went on Fiverr, I might find somebody who's just trying to make a quick buck and slam something together. And I don't know how to distinguish somebody who really enjoys it versus somebody who just wants some money out of the deal. And by finding the forum, I know I've got the enthusiasts and the guys who really care about this thing. Well, I found the right guy. We Zoomed back and forth a whole bunch, working on what I want it to sound like, what I don't want it to sound like. And ultimately, we arrived at something I'm very happy with. I couldn't be happier with what he did for me. It took a couple tries to get him away from the cartoony feel. You know, I'm like, I don't want this to sound like Looney Tunes. You know, this is not to get too, you know, serious about engine parts moving around, but I didn't feel like I was making a even though I'm animating, I didn't want it to feel like a cartoon.
Yeah, no, it definitely elevates it even more.
And you know, the other ones, I've done all the sound effects, and I say that the sound effects, the music on the other one is just there to hide the bad sound effects, like ones that I didn't get quite right. But you know, it's just a kind of a repetitive song on all the other ones, and that just, I was set out to make a real film, and a real film requires a film score. So I'm very happy with how it turned out, and I'm very happy I found him. Nicholas Allen Nelson is his name, and he just did great.
And I wanted to ask about the sound effects because for somebody I'm starting out in filmmaking, and that's something I like was really like honing in on, like, because I'm also an audio engineer.
Okay.
And so I'm just curious. So did you make the whole film and then go back and do all the sound?
Yeah. The sound effects are my least favorite part because I have a completed film, and it's like, it feels like I should be done. I can watch the whole thing, and then I have to go back and do this whole sound thing. And it takes, I can get away with a lot more visual errors and mistakes than I can with audio. If the piston doesn't sound similar every time he slides and moves around, that's going to bump you. You're going to know the difference between the sound of something heavy landing on the table with a clunk than something lighter landing with like a tink sound. And so for the most part, what you're seeing is me with my recorder recording the actual parts so that the sound is just right for each one you're seeing. And some of those sounds are so quiet, it's really difficult, because I'm in my garage. If a car drives by, that ruins that sound recording, so I got to try it again. When the heat kicks on, you know, that can mess one up. It's much more difficult than you would think it is, unless you talk to other people that have tried it, and they'll all tell you the same thing.
So were you doing it like actual Foley work, where you're kind of watching and you're just sliding things around? I would
set up whatever part that I was recording for on a loop, and I'd kind of, you know, if it was the piston moving across the table, I'd watch it a couple times, and then I'd, you know, it has to be the right sound of, like, it starts off slow, speeds up, and then it slows down at the end. You can't just drag at the same speed, or else the sound doesn't match the motion. So I'd usually do like 4 or 5, like, as it was looping, and then I'd go back and pick a good one. When I went back and edited and figured out how to do the software, the Adobe, what's the program called?
Audition or
Audition. Yeah. So I figured out how to filter out the hiss and pop and buzzing sounds and get clean audio with that. And, you know, that all took a whole lot of work.
Well, I think we have a question from the gallery. Shauna, do you have one for us?
We do. Rodney wanted to let you know that he loves the film, and his kids are really into making stop motion films. So he's going to be sure to share some of the tripod and erasing tips that you put forth in the interview today.
Well, thank you, Rodney.
Oh, sorry. We're talking over you.
Go ahead.
So he also really liked how you got the piston to look at the poster of the bike in the air, and it was almost like the piston was pondering the history of the bike and the future of the bike once it gets rebuilt, of kind of a reflection of everything it had been through and all the hope all in one shot. So he thought that was really amazing.
I'm glad it came across, because that's exactly what I was trying to get across. And
nice.
It took a lot of, I set the camera up a lot of different ways and pondered a lot of different, just a lot of different methods you could use to try and get that across. And I'm just glad it worked. And that is, he's looking and saying, this is my future. This is what I was meant to do. I can do it. There it is right there.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
So,
and then
thank you, Rodney.
So Rodney was also wondering, I mean, I think you said about 500 hours for the whole filming process. He was curious if it took longer to film or to do the actual rebuild.
You know, I was trying to set up in my garage so you could see the bike, because the rest of the bike is done now. But that didn't work. The short answer is I could have rebuilt that bike multiple times with the time that I spent on this engine alone. Yeah, it absolutely multiple times over, no question. But
And I'm curious, in the bike breakdown video, I've never been able to break something down without having like broken bolts and stuff like that. Did you have to deal with a lot of that?
so all these videos that you've seen,
Mm-hmm.
everything was torn down beforehand.
Okay.
On the bike, maybe not completely torn down, but like you're talking about, I made sure every bolt was loose. I made sure the swing arm, the axle, or the swing arm pivot bolt rather, was going to pop out and not be rusted in place. The axles, I made sure all of that was going to come out. And the engine, I split it completely apart, and I actually went in and dremeled out the bearings so that I knew the crankcase, the crankshaft would come out easily for me. Because, you know, exactly what you're saying, if I'm trying to hold everything perfectly in position and move it, you know, fractions of an inch to an inch at a time, I can't be reefing on something and have the whole thing break loose on me and kind of ruin the whole shot. So yeah, I go in there beforehand and make sure that it's all gonna come apart nicely for me.
Another one that was really cool, putting the bearing and the seal in and having to heat the case. How was that working with the flame? Because that's kind of harder to control, right?
Yes, and the reason that shot the way it shot is specifically because there was no way I was going to keep a flame on the engine case and the bearing long enough to be able to take the pictures I needed to take. You know, it'd melt right through. So, you know, it rolls off and then he tips out of frame. So I turn the flame off as it tips out of frame, and then the flame is not actually going on the engine case. You know, you put the sound effects in there as it is, and it registers, okay, it's heating that up. But unless I wanted to try some method of simulating the flame with, I don't know, clear or like transparent blue film or something, I wasn't looking to do that. So that was my workaround for it.
So another one, there's so many questions as I was watching it. I'm like, this has got to be so difficult, but you make it look so easy. When all the parts are going down into the bin, you had a mass amount of parts flying. How did you keep those in place?
In a way, the shooting of that was actually one of the easier shots, because I have a tripod with like a handle gear that raises and lowers it. So I start with it all the way up, and I put duct tape with the sticky side out around some cardboard and stuck all those parts to it. And then I was able to just lower everything at once together to show it dropping in the bucket. And the harder part was going back and doing the Photoshop work on every individual nut, bolt, and washer. That was a little more difficult. But yeah, shooting that one, it was on a gear that I could hand wind, and it all just moves down together.
Yeah, that was amazing. I would have to say one of probably the hard things for you, every one of these you've gotten better. You've learned so much more. It makes it harder to walk away when you have all that knowledge. But it is a huge commitment. So I'm just curious, do you have another one in you?
Not anytime soon. And something that tedious and difficult is pretty easy to walk away from. To your point, I'm at a place where I live now that is not the same place I shot that. And if I was going to do these again, which at some point I think I'd like to, I think if I am able to keep doing them, we're talking 30-second shorts. We're not talking another, 8-minute video. but it'd have to be somewhere where I had the room to leave it set up and not feel like, for this one, the clock was ticking. I had to get it done. I knew we were going to be moving, and it was just always calling me, like, I have to get back out there. If I don't get it, then I've lost my shot, and the whole thing's, for nothing. So if I could have it set up to where it was a little more, a little less rushed and just there waiting for me, I'd absolutely like to do some more.
So, and that brings up, did you have any mishaps? Like where like somebody moved something or?
I had numerous minor mishaps that involved something falling, sliding out of place.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, I was able to, this software has modes of zooming in and really being able to like get it right back in the place that it was so that you don't notice twitches and movements. That it wasn't necessarily a mistake, but I did have to cut one part that I spent probably an 8-hour day shooting. So I shot the whole thing, and then it was a different way of shooting the looking up at the poster part.
Yeah.
And it was probably a month later when I said, no, I'm going to have to do that. I'm going to have to cut that. I couldn't talk myself into cutting it when it was so fresh in my memory, how much time I just spent on it. Then you remove yourself a little bit from it, and I just realized it wasn't the right way to do it. And so I cut it. But,
well, that was something I took notice of too. The changing of the camera angles, it gave it more dimension and depth.
Yep. Yeah. When I go back and watch my other videos, the lack of change in the camera angle makes it difficult to keep it interesting. And they're all also slower paced. I look back at the old ones and think, man, the first one I could play at 2 times speed and not miss anything. And this one, I feel like the pacing's good, and maybe I could cut a couple seconds here or there, but for the most part, I'm just really happy with it.
Nice. Now, have you been riding the bike?
So I just got to show it off at a local Moto themed coffee shop. It's called Spoken Moto here in Bend, Oregon. And I had just finished it. I don't even have oil and radiator coolant in it and everything. I said, it's perfect, pristine. Let's just set it up there, show it off a little bit. And the truth is, I'm so burnt out on working on the thing. I'm worried I'm going to go to start it and then find something that needs fixed. And I don't feel like fixing anything right now, but within a month or so, I'd say I'm going to get the itch.
Now, I don't know if that bike has a name, but can I recommend one?
What do you got?
Gumby.
Gumby. Green. Yeah.
Yeah.
Green,
right.
Yeah.
Well, I think we got one more question from the gallery. What do you got, Shauna?
So Rodney actually was wondering if you could share what program or app you use for your erasing and editing.
So there's a number of them, and if Rodney wants to contact me through my like Mechanimations page or whatever, I'm happy to answer whatever questions he's got. But the short answer is the most important program for me is called Dragon Frame, and that's the one that I was saying at the beginning is the same program that studios use to make professional stop motion animation. I use all the Adobe programs for photo and video and audio editing after that, but Dragon Frame is the reason it's smooth and lifelike and all that.
Nice. Well, I wanted to thank you for participating in these interviews and in the film festival. And I want to make sure people have an opportunity to see your other work. Where is the best place for them to go to find that?
All of my full-length videos are on my YouTube channel, Mechanimations, as in mechanical animation, Mechanimation, and that's the same thing on Instagram, Mechanimations. That'll have some more behind the scenes where you see me going back and forth and moving and shooting, and kind of a look into how I did it.
Nice. Well, thanks again. It was really cool to see something just so fresh and different from everything else. And I hope that you continue doing it. It is a great craft. And especially to see somebody like, his kids like wanting to do that. It's an old craft, but you found a way to really make it cool.
I've heard from a lot of people that this is still something kids are into, which, the oldest, slowest way of doing something, but still has an appeal. And I was inspired to do this because I saw a stop motion animation of a old car engine rebuild. Yeah. And if somebody saw what I do and had the same inspiration, that'd be, not to get too corny here, but that'd make it all worth it.
Nice. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for what you do for the film festival and everything else.
Great. Thanks again.
Yes.
All right. Well, coming up next, this is another good one. I mentioned earlier that we had 2 winners of the Best Ultra Short. And I know I keep saying these are all my favorites, but this is another one of my favorites, the movie Trailmaster. And the filmmaker is with us now, Matthew Sanders. Matthew, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hey, there you are.
All right,
Do you
great.
prefer Matthew or Matt?
Either Matt's great. That's fine. That works.
That's great. Hey, well, great to see you. And
too.
Not only did you have Trailmaster, you snuck in another film on us because I didn't even realize that they were the same filmmaker because they're so completely different. And that film is the one Moto show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I really enjoyed because I go to that event. And in fact, I saw you there just recently.
I know you found me in the crowd.
I know it wasn't hard. So yeah, congratulations on having 2 films and congratulations on winning for Trailmaster. One of the things I really loved about it was, I don't want to say it's a simple film, but it's about somebody, it's kind of this behind the scenes in part of the motorcycle culture that I've never really seen or thought much about. The people who go out there and maintain these trails up in Oregon. I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of work.
Yeah. It's a crazy job they have.
And let's see, Reed Brown, he's like what, 3rd generation?
Yeah. Yep.
Of maintaining these trails. And I just love that. It's somebody who's so passionate about what they do, and you were able to capture that in this film. So how did you discover Reed Brown and think about this?
That's a good question. It was actually a friend of mine who was out riding, because we all ride out there. I mean, if you live in Portland and you ride dirt bikes, that's pretty much where you end up. So a friend of mine had been out there one day, and he told me that you don't run into those guys very often out in the woods. Actually, not as much as you think you would. But he's like, I ran into this guy, and he was in the official truck, but he had a dirt bike in the back. And I just started talking to him, and it turns out like he's the guy that maintains all these trails, and his dad did it and his grandpa did it, and like he's like, I think it'd be a really cool he's just like, this would be a really cool person to hang out with, just to know. And then I just started thinking about it. I was like, what? It actually sounds like a really interesting story that like maybe we could tell, if we could just find out more about this guy. So he got me in touch, and I went out and met Reed. And I think he was working on a trail the day I was there. So he had this cool machine that he uses. And turns out his dad invented this machine to build these trails. And so it was just it was really cool. And we kind of like talked about what we could do and how it, how it could be helpful for what he does, and just an interesting story to tell. And then, my friend Sky Pinnock, who's also a filmmaker, he and I kind of tag teamed on this one, and we went out and shot various days of them working out in the woods and followed Reed with his family and stuff like that. It was really cool.
So I'm curious, especially going out onto single track, I'm guessing you can't get trucks with all the equipment. What were some of the challenges you had?
Well, it wasn't that bad because we ride out there all the time. So the big thing is like how much gear can you take with you, like camera gear. And that was actually what made this project kind of perfect, because we decided we were going to go super lightweight, and we had some friends at GoPro at the time. And so we contacted them and like, hey, we've got this kind of interesting project idea. You know, we'd love to film the whole thing on GoPros. And, you know, would you guys be interested in helping us out? And they actually really like super dug the idea and just thought it was really a cool angle on the whole sport. So, you know, they sent us a bunch of gear and they helped us out. And, you know, from there, it was pretty easy, because then you just ride your motorcycle with a bag full of, you know, 3 or 4 GoPros. The drones were slightly larger when we filmed this than they are now. So we had to have like a drone that could actually fly a GoPro. But that was like the biggest thing that we brought with us. And everything else, like the audio, I think we had like a Zoom recorder for that. But then it's just like you could just ride a dirt bike out, and they would, you know, most of the trail systems out there, the trails come down off of a road, so you can like access sections of the trail by the road. So you get to like one end of the trail and you can go in and find them wherever they're working and stuff like that. So it's usually not that bad.
And there was a great moment that you captured. I'm wondering if this was intended or you just happened to catch it when he had completed that route and had just opened it up right as a guy and his son came along.
Yeah.
And just as he's watching them ride off on this freshly built trail.
Well, I don't want to like spoil the mystique of that moment and tell you that we staged it a little bit. The 2 people that were on that trail, the guy and the younger kid was actually my friend who introduced me to Reed. So, and that was his stepson. And so they were riding out, and they literally were the first people on that trail when they opened it. So, but we were like, hey, wait, we want to do this. You know, we want to have our friends come. So it wasn't just like accidental they were there, but we definitely planned for that. And you know, it was really kind of a cool moment though, that he got to watch that happen.
Well, and exactly. That's still the sign of a good filmmaker. Even though you orchestrated that moment, it was still real. It was very sincere to see the look on his face. He had some pride as they were riding off.
Yeah, totally.
So that was really cool. You have actually a long history of working with motorcycles and filming. In fact, you probably have the dream job that everyone wishes they had, but didn't even realize it exists. Can you talk a bit about your history? And I mean, you've worked with so many different companies, Zero, Triumph, Polaris, GoPro, Revit, Icon, Indian. Dude, how'd you do this?
I don't know. I liken it to like surfing. It's just like you just kind of stay on the wave as long as you can. And that's pretty much what it feels like my career has been. So you know, it's just, you bounce around a little bit and just try to stay in like the same zone if you can. But yeah, it just happened really. I mean, honestly, I went to school for not for filmmaking, and it was like engineering and computer graphics. And like, you know, I started my career doing like design work, like 3-dimensional design for like, you know, like footwear, shoe kind of stuff like that, and engineering type of stuff. And the filmmaking stuff was just a side thing that I was interested in. When I was a kid, I had, you know, cameras and stuff, and we used to make movies with our friends, and we always had a good time doing that. But I ended up getting a job at Icon Motorsports, and they were just looking for a 3D designer at the time. And so I was like, yeah, sure, I'll give you a resume, but like, here's this other stuff I do too. And I sent them a DVD I'd been working on with some friends. We were just in our spare time, like making these like cataloging roads in Oregon that you can ride on. So we made this like video series, and this is like way before YouTube. So this was something that just got passed around like on an actual DVD to friends. And those kind of, I gave them one of those and like, oh, that's really cool. Like maybe you guys could, you know, you could do something with us. Cause we didn't, Icon at the time was no company. I mean, they just had a couple products and no video. So I spent a couple years there just doing like 3D work. And then finally, like at one point they're like, hey, can you do a trade show video for us for this like big trade show coming up? Here's a bunch of footage and stuff like that. And so I brought in my like home editing station to my work at the time. And I put this video together of all this existing footage, but like this was still before YouTube, but like, so they, you know, they put it at this trade show and people were just like stopping dead in their tracks and like watching it. And like, then they put it online and, you know, like we got this big, like on the forums back then, you know, so it was like the online forums were going crazy about it. And so then they just kept asking me to make more stuff. And they just kind of like, okay, well now can you make another video? Can you go out and film something this time? And so I was kind of learning and getting paid to learn at the time, because I still had the other part of my job, which was, you know, like designing all these like 3D parts and stuff. But it just every month that went on, it was just like more video, less of the other stuff. And then it was just pure video. And I spent like 5 years probably just doing nothing but video for them full time.
And I've been to the headquarters there.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
At Icon. And
Yeah.
I've seen all the outlets to be creative.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen the garage where people are like building crazy bikes, and I've been up in the design rooms, and you see all sorts of just inspirations and images and stuff. What a great place to work. But it almost sounds like you created the template that they're still following today.
I don't know. I wouldn't take all the credit for it, but I think that like I was part of that original push that got it going. So that was really cool. And it was huge, huge, just like to jumpstart everything I'm doing now. It got to the point where we had a couple of really big hit videos that like launched right when YouTube was like the thing. Mm-hmm. And those went like, like for the time, like mega, but like compared to stuff now, it was like, it's not even a big deal anymore, but it was like, like some of the first like big viral motorcycle stuff. And that was super fun. But then I started getting all these like random people would find out I did this thing for Icon, and they would call me and say, hey, can you do something like that for us or whatever? And, I was always still working a full-time job. And I was like, well, I'm kind of in this full-time job, so I don't really have time to do that. But then eventually I was just like, I think I should just try it on my own. And so like, I think it's been 8 years now that I've been just doing it on my own, and just kind of from that industry, people would start calling me, and then people move around from one company to another, and then they call you back. So that's kind of how like those connections start happening. But it's been really good. Like it's been really fun. It's just when I think it's going to go away, like something else happens, and I'm just like, oh, that's cool. Okay. I'll do whatever, thing is coming up. But there's like always a mix of, there's the really cool, fun ones, and then there's the ones that are maybe sometimes more trouble than they're worth. But there's, you got to take the good with the bad. But it's always overall pretty cool.
No, it's really cool to watch. You definitely have a sort of a style, even on I think one of the more recent ones you did, the Revit 2021 Dirt. Mm-hmm. There's a shot where somebody's riding through a mud puddle and the camera's right behind them getting splashed. I'm like, how'd you do that?
That was a FPV drone. More, the new technology stuff. So we actually chased him through the mud puddle with the drone. We had a really cool pilot. He was just like, he knows how to build. He has like 5 of them he comes out with, and he's just like, sure, I'll chase him through, and it doesn't matter if it gets wet. And so he was just right behind him.
That was crazy, but really cool seeing what you're doing. But Trailmaster wasn't the only film. You also did the One Moto show.
Yep.
I just have to say, Bert Furness. So the other thing, if you guys haven't seen this, this was one that really brought in some comedy. And I'm just curious, you did this with your friend, Tor Drake.
Yep.
And I'm curious, did this come from your brain or his?
Bert is his guy. That's his character. He came up with Bert and did like one small thing with it. And then a few years back, we decided, we were talking, we're like, well, let's use Bert with the one show, videos, and let's make a thing where he's, he's being the guy. So we started that. It was probably like 2 or 3 one shows ago. We started using Bert for these little like promo things. And it's super fun. It is. It's just like we go out, we have a rough idea of what we want. It's all just messing around. So it feels like it is very much like the old days when I was a kid, and our friends we put like our models on strings and like fly them around and crash them into each other and just have fun. Like it feels like that kind of, like movie making, I guess.
Yeah. Well, even some of the details, like when he's at his office underneath the stairs.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that just looks like so much fun. But the other thing I found interesting about it is, you're getting a lot of work from these big companies. And then it seems like you're doing this. Is it true you did this in your spare time?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, like it's good for me. It just, like for a filmmaker to be like, to help these guys out and just to be part of the show. And I want to be part of the show. So it's just good all around to do it. And it's fun. So it's kind of been like my yearly find time to make it happen project. I usually have like one or two of those, you know, like that I try to throw in between the all the commercial stuff that's going on, just to like have my own freedom to do things the way I want to. A lot of times in the commercial world, you get, you know, like ideas get shot down and you're at the mercy of whatever corporate thing they need to do. So it's really fun to at least get a chance to do stuff like that. And like the outlet with the one show is perfect, you know, like, because Tor's very like, yeah, whatever you want to do, man, let's do it.
Yeah, the one show is one of my favorite events to attend, and it's had to go through different venues because it's this very industrial thing, but the places keep getting rebuilt. In fact, this year it was at the what's it called, the name of the building again?
Zidell Yards.
Zidell Yards, this giant shipyard that I hear is already slated to be torn down.
Yeah, it's going to be an apartment building or something.
But you were there filming, so I'm curious, will we be seeing another film?
So this year was a little different because the happenings at the show were much more subdued, you know, just because they were trying to, you know, so I feel like we're going to see something, but I don't know what it's going to be yet. There was no real plan going into this. The show came up very quickly this year too. Like I think they were just like, you know what, let's just do it, and let's do it, you know, like as soon as we can. So I'm not going to make any promises on what it's going to end up like, but there are a lot of times where Tor and I will go back after the show and we'll create some little things to add to the video to give it a little flavor. Like some of the burnt furnace stuff was done after the show. So it's all, we'll see. There's some really cool bikes though that we filmed, and that was kind of my big goal, is just to make sure that like everything that happened and what it looked like and who was there, we captured that. But I have no idea how it's going to go together yet.
Please tell me that you got burnt furnace on top of the Seattle Cossacks pyramid.
I don't think so.
No? That would have been gold, man. No, that was a great event. So I'm just curious, what's like the next step for you? You've already carved out this niche of making films for companies, and then on the side doing fun films. Yeah. What's the next step for you?
I don't know. That's a good question. I've been asking myself that a lot these days, because I think I set some goals originally when I did this, you know, like I set a goal of like, I would love to get a company to pay me to make just a really cool, fun video that has, you know, like it's just more about how great the video and filmmaking is than it is about anything else. And I kind of did that. So I feel like that's kind of like, it's been happening and I get it now. And now it's to the point where, it's like, I'm much more selective about what I'm doing. And you know, like there's you get constant calls, you know, of people wanting stuff, but like, it's just a matter of like, do you want to do it or spend your time on it? So, I've had a couple of close calls with like getting like some sort of, you know, like, oh, this could be the one that like, you know, like maybe I'll be able to make a real movie or something, but, I'm always just like close, and then it's back down to like normal again. And, so I don't know. I right now, like my focus is on, you know, doing the commercial work, and I've got some property that we're working on in Washington. So I'm like, my brain is like half like farmer and half video maker. So.
Well, it seems obvious to me that the next step would be second unit director. Having the way that you know awesome. How vehicles move and how to capture it, but also, I mean, there are so many things you're filming where like it's coming right by the camera. I'm guessing you're not really taking that much risk, or are you? Have you had close calls?
Oh yeah.
Can you share some?
Well, yeah, we've had I mean, honestly, like, and I now am like, I lay down the law a lot more than I used to. Like when a client starts asking me for certain things, you know, like, and if they're not asking for it in the right way, or they don't understand what they're asking for, I'm now much more clear with them about what they're actually asking for and how it could go wrong, just because we've seen so many things go wrong over the years. But I mean, the famous, you know, hey, I'm just going to warm up real quick line. it usually ends in disaster. So be careful of that one right when you start any shoot. And then the, hey, we're all done. Let's wrap it up for the day. And then, oh no, just one more time. That one is for sure going to end with somebody getting tossed. So, but yeah, we've had lots of stuff go wrong over the years. Cars flipping over, motorcycles, like coming apart. We've had guys breaking, multiple brakes, and it's been pretty gnarly. And that's one of the things that has been definitely tough about the job too, is that side of it. And I don't think that there's enough, probably maybe not enough people talking about that. They make it seem as though it's probably safer than, it's just I think it gets glazed over a lot. So I've been involved with a couple projects where the writer hasn't made it, and that hasn't been very cool. And so, the second time that happened wasn't that long ago. And definitely that makes you rethink everything, what you're showing, how you're doing it, so that's given me a little bit of pause overall, and maybe just change my perspective on things. But just more about how do I want to portray this stuff and going forward, from the way it used to be.
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, when you're working with people who are stunt writers, and then you put a camera on them, they want to do more, they want to do better, they want to go faster. It must be hard. I'm curious, like I said, becoming a second unit director, for those who don't know, a director of a film will direct the actors, but you have a second unit director who's doing the car chase scenes and stuff like that, which for any of us, motorheads, is usually the highlight of the film, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that you're so good at. But how do you work with the riders or the drivers and get them to take it easy or be safe?
Well, if they're professional, then you don't have to worry about it because they know already. It's usually the newer, the newer to the scene people that you have to really, be very careful with.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that most of the professional people you just have to just give them the opportunity that they need and listen to what they want, for them to be safe, because they already know exactly what it takes. So if you're listening and you provide them with what they need, then it's usually pretty, things go pretty well. The last minute things can sometimes be the ones that end up biting you. So, the one guy asking for one more shot, or whatever it is. So it's just kind of, I guess I forgot where I was going with that, but it's definitely something you got to really just take it easy with.
Well, and you've managed, as I said earlier, to carve out this dream job. I'm curious, what's on your list? What event or story or challenge do you have on your list that you want to get on film?
That's a good question. I feel like I've just done so much that I'm having a hard time finding that next big thing. I mean, like you said, a second unit, something like that would be awesome. Just to get involved with a bigger project.
Yeah.
Or even for me these days, I like doing more of the specialized stuff too. So a lot of the projects I've been involved in, it's usually I'm producing it, shooting a part of it, directing a part of it, always editing it. I'd love to be in one where I could just be hired as the director guy. And that's all you got to do is just come in, direct it, give us your vision, and then we'll show you some stuff in a couple weeks. That would be awesome. But, as far as a motorcycle project goes, I think right now the next one we have coming up is going to be kind of fun. We're doing an adventure trip in a few weeks that we're going to do some filming on. And so the goal of this one is just to kind of it's almost like a behind the scenes. I usually never go in front of the camera. So it'll be a little bit of a behind the scenes of if a photographer and a video guy got to do their dream trip shoot with somebody. And so we're going to see how it goes. It'll be interesting because it's going to be backpacking and riding and shooting and, trying to get these really epic shots at the end of every day. And then we'll tell the story of, how we actually got these shots throughout the video.
Backpacking. How many batteries are you going to have to take with you?
Well, So the photographer and I are like synchronizing our gear. So it's like we have the same cameras. We're going to be able to share batteries and lenses, the same drone. So everything is very like standardized.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be we're not sleeping in, under the stars every night. So we'll have some charging opportunities hopefully along the way.
Yeah, that's always one of the challenges. So, you've been in this industry a while. GoPros and now drones have really changed the possibilities for the novice filmmaker. They made it really easy for anyone to get into it. I'm curious, since you're really in it, what's next? What do you think is the next technology, or what advice would you give to people who want to go the next step with the filmmaking?
That's a good question too. The drones are really, really cool right now. I think in my brain, the next good technology is going to be like the stabilized camera that doesn't need a gimbal. Like they're getting really close with that. So
really?
A lot of the SLRs now, like the stabilization is really good. So you don't need a gimbal. And that makes it so you can have a much lighter, easier to use package and get really cool, like cinematic shots without having to have all this extra gear. And anybody that's ever shot with me knows how much I hate using gimbals. So they've heard me swearing. And to me, when that's fully out there, it's going to be a big game changer. Like the newest GoPros, the stabilization on them, you really don't need a gimbal, but you're still like shooting on a GoPro. So it always looks, it's always going to look like the size of that lens, and the field of view is always GoPro-esque. But like when the more cinematic cameras, when you can just pick one up and it's just, dead steady, handheld.
Yeah, I just picked up one of those DJI
yes,
little hand gimbals.
Yeah, those are
and
great.
Just things getting just smaller, easier to take out. And just for me, as somebody who's new into filmmaking, and it's so easy to have GoPros and little gimbals and carry everything and have it on there. It makes the possibilities even better. And so, yeah, that's why I was just wondering, like, what advice do you give to somebody who's getting into it? Do they spend the big money?
Oh yeah, no, I would definitely say don't do that. Get stuff that's going to last. Your lenses and stuff like that, like if you're going to invest in some lenses, make sure you're getting like a lens standard that's going to be around for a while. You don't want to buy anything that's going to be obsolete. And then I would just go basic, like an SLR and a lens and an audio kit. And like, you can pretty much do anything with that. So it's, like it does not take, and these days with, people watching everything on their iPhones, I mean, like, it's so rare that you watch something on a big screen anymore to really see like the quality that camera is giving. Like an expensive camera would give something that like, and most of the kids already know this. They're like, oh, I'll just shoot it on my iPhone. It doesn't matter. And it honestly doesn't matter. Like their stuff is so good. It's just like, it's the content that's good. But I would just go like an SLR with a good lens, kit, and like, it's the lenses that make it all look good anyways. So if you can do that, you're pretty set. And then, I'm a sucker for technology though. So and my friends also know this about me. So I have like a real a problem, I would say.
I know this about you, and I'll use one word that shows Alta.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I'm an early adopter. Yes.
Yes. So you have one of the great Alta bikes.
I did. And I was super into it. I actually wish I kept it. But
you didn't? Oh,
when the company went under, I was just like, well, what's going to happen if, the littlest thing happens to this bike and I break it? And it's like, I can't fix it. Like I'm not an electrical engineer. So, and you need to be an electrical engineer to fix that thing if it breaks. I have friends that still have them and they're still using them. And, but these are guys that like used to work at Alta, so they know what they're doing. But, I was like, well, there was a guy online who was like buying up all the Altas. So he's like a connoisseur, and, he made me an offer on mine. I was like, sure, take it. It stung. And then I ended up getting a KTM.
Okay.
A KTM 300 two-stroke, a used one. And like the very first ride I take, the loud, smoky two-stroke, the exact opposite of the Alta. It ends in the thing like just like oil going everywhere on the ground. I was like, oh, great. Yeah. Welcome back. Welcome back to reality. But I've told my friends, like the next electric good dirt bike that comes out, I will definitely be in line for it. And I'm happy to, do that. If it's a cool company, if it's Honda, that'd be awesome. If it's one of the big companies, but if it was like Alta 2.0, I'd still, do it just because it was such a great experience. But,
well, who knows at this rate, it might be Harley Davidson,
Yeah, exactly.
We don't know. I mean, Zero's got the FX, but the thing about Alta, it was a race ready bike.
Yeah, it was a great machine. It wasn't just like, it was no toy. It was, I mean, on the trails and stuff, it was super fun. The only downside to an Alta is the sound that it makes. It's so wimpy. It was wimpy, but it had a bite. And when you got it to make just the right sound, you knew you were going really fast. So it was pretty cool. But it was cool going through the woods though, because you could hear like the trees going by and just the wind, and like it was just such a neat experience to like be out there, like on those trails like Trailmaster, but do it in a way where you could hear everything, which is totally different. Well, and I wanted to thank you for coming on and talking with us today, and also for submitting not one but 2 films. Yeah. And now that I've gone through your back catalog, I'm like, oh wait a minute, we got more film festivals coming out. What else can we dig into? I've got to make some more that are film festival worthy. So a lot of it I just don't ever feel like it's like that. But like Trailmaster was one, and I'm like, this is one that we all put our heart and soul into. So it's that kind of stuff, and the one show every year. So I'll make some more, and I'll definitely keep submitting more. So yeah, well, that's what we're here to help bring these films to the motorcycle community, because we really can't get enough. So yeah, I wanted to thank you again, and hopefully I'll see you again next year at the One Show, because that's one of my favorite places. If somebody wants to check out your work, what's the best place to go to see it? Probably just go to my website, fluid.com, spelled PHLEWID. Yeah, it's worth checking out, even though they're really, they're branded films. It's beautifully shot, and it's cool even just to see some of these places you're going and the locations, and it's just beautiful. And then I believe also there's something about drift cars and motorcycles. Yep. That people might want to check out. Where can they find that? All of that stuff would be on my website, so you can get links to it. But yeah, the drift stuff could be on the Icon YouTube channel. There's stuff on like Monster Energy, and it's all over the place. Well, you got a lot of cool stuff. I'm really looking forward to what's next. And again, thank you for coming on, and thank you to everyone who's been with us following these interviews. What an inspiration. I hope you catch all of these movies, especially make sure now you watch both of his movies, Trailmaster and the One Moto Show, now that you know some of the behind the scenes. Thanks, everyone. I think we're ready to wrap out of here. Thank you. Matt, thanks again. See ya. All right, see ya. Shauna, you there? And I think we're ready to wrap up. Shauna, I just wanted to say thank you to you for handling everyone in the background as well. And just want to tell everyone, go to revsisters.com, and you can see our future film festivals, because we have another one we're already working on now. So as you're finishing these films now, make sure you sign up for our mailing list at revsisters.com so you can be notified of what is coming up next. All right, ready to get out of here. Thanks, everyone. See ya.